All right. So, welcome everyone to chapter 9. This is our second to last chapter in the textbook. It's hard to believe that we are almost done with our textbook and the semester is half over after today. This is week 8. Everyone take your hand, put it up in the air for a minute. Okay. Bend it backwards. Pat yourself on the back a couple of times. Okay, we've made it halfway through. The fall semester is traditionally a little bit tougher than the spring semester, at least from my perspective as a faculty member, because in the spring we have Easter, we have spring break, we have Fiesta Friday. So all these little pockets of breaks built into the spring. But the fall, we have Labor Day, and then we have Thanksgiving. And so it is like a marathon in the fall. So if you are feeling exhausted or tired, just understand that that is very normal for the fall semester. All right. So chapter 9, we've talked about in previous chapters, we've talked about food cost, a little bit about beverage cost because food and beverage have similar concepts. And then now we're going to focus on labor. Okay. Does anybody remember what that term is for food and beverage and labor combined? Those two costs, food and beverage cost and
Prime
labor
cost?
cost, is what's known as blank costs.
Was it the prime?
It is our prime costs. Why is food and beverage and labor? Why are those two costs considered our prime cost?
They're the most important.
They yes and no. I'm not sure if important is the correct word, just because I mean sometimes you may have like your rent that's not included in there. Your rent is part of your location, which also might be a really important cost. Because the terminology location, location, location. You could have the most amazing concept, but if it's in the wrong location, then you may not be as successful. But they're the easiest to control. Exactly, Caitlin and Ryan, the majority of the cost. Okay. So they are the easiest for us to control. That's why they're our prime cost. Who can give me an example of how we control our cost for food or beverage?
Expensive stuff for expensive ingredients for good quality ingredients at a lower.
Okay, so we might look at redoing our menus or our recipes and substituting. Maybe is there a different ingredient that is the same quality, but maybe at a lower price? Okay. Fast food restaurants are notorious for doing that. They are constantly looking for a vendor to provide them their food because they're always looking at that minute, that whatever the lowest cost possible while maintaining quality. Remember, we talked about that the very first week or second week. We don't want to sacrifice quality so far just for the sake of saving money that then our quality suffers and then our guests don't want to order our food. Okay. Anybody else?
Check if it's cheaper to source locally than it would be to like to source being shipped in.
Okay, yeah. Absolutely. So we might save on transportation costs if we're supporting a local vendor. Okay, good. What about beverage costs? How can we save on beverage costs?
Buying cheaper liquor.
Okay, so maybe buying cheaper ingredients. Again, we want to make sure that the quality is there. Otherwise, if we sacrifice quality, then we may lose customers because their expectations are not there. Okay. Now, okay, so Ryan made a comment about serving exactly the portion that you need. So in controlling our cost for beverages, remember the video that we watched for Bar Patrol, that bartender served more, $200 more worth of alcohol than she should have. And so we lost out on that $200. And so in that case, we can conserve our costs by using specific measuring tools, more, what's the word I'm looking for? More supervisory, so make sure that they understand that we are tracking our inventory in that regard. Okay. So now labor. Labor is the overarching term for not only the wages that we pay, but also the salaries, and including that in that labor terminology, we also include benefits and taxes. Okay. So labor includes salaries, wages, benefits, and taxes. Bless you.
Thank you.
So, in a very simplified explanation, okay, um, what benefits do we sometimes offer our employees? Health benefits, okay.
Vision.
Vision and dental potentially. Okay, we might offer them paid time off. Sick time, okay. So we might give them sick leave. So if they are sick, they might have a certain number of hours that, like, maybe let's say it's up to, I don't know, let's throw out a number of, maybe it's up to 40 hours a year that you get sick time. So if you're sick, you can call in sick and you can use part of those 40 hours. And so they'll still pay you for that work, they'll still pay you for that shift. Up to that 40-hour limit. Okay. So that's time that we are paying somebody for not actually doing the work because they're sick up to a certain time period. Okay. Yeah, benefits might include free meals as well. Absolutely. That's a great example. Caitlin, the retirement. So any kind of retirement possibilities, or retirement funds. Okay. So all of those are extra costs to the business, okay? And then we also have taxes on top of that. So if you were to look at your paycheck and you see your FICA taxes, okay, that is only half of the responsibility of FICA. So your employer pays the other half. So whatever your amount is, the employer also is paying that same amount on your behalf. Okay. And then additionally, in addition to those taxes, we also have unemployment taxes or unemployment insurance. Okay. So employers are paying into unemployment. So when people collect on unemployment, it's a similar system, just like your car insurance or your medical insurance, right? You pay into it in advance so that when people actually have to use it, they're pulling from the funds that you've already paid into. Um, and so employers have that additional expense. Okay. And so, as wonderful and easy as it is to say that we're going to jump the minimum wage from $7.25 to 15, 18, $25 in some cases, it's really easy to say that. But from the business perspective, from the business owner, we have to figure out, okay, what's that going to do to the rest of our expenses? Because if we increase that, then that's also going to increase our taxes. Um, and then also potentially maybe even the benefits too, because Caitlin mentioned the 401k. Oftentimes those types of retirement benefits are based on a percentage of your income. So they may contribute 4% towards your retirement or whatever the percentage might be. So by increasing that stuff, it increases a lot of other things. And then how do restaurants have to deal with increased costs? What are they going to do? Are they just going to take it out of their profit? No. What are they going to do? What do they have to do?
Calculate it in and
Calculate it in and then do what?
average it out, make it big.
they're probably gonna have to
Increase
raise their,
prices?
they have to raise their prices, right? So that $15 hamburger is now probably gonna be 18, 19, $20. Because we have to account for the extra income, the extra expense on the labor side. And so it's really important to consider the impacts of things on businesses, right? And how that could potentially overall impact everything. So labor is probably one of the largest expenses for an operation, even more so than food and beverage. So anytime that we can save anything on our labor, is really helpful. Okay. Um, and I want to think, I recently went to, can't remember if it was this class or another class that I was talking about this with, but I recently went to a webinar on the new federal taxes tax plan that was just passed recently. And that includes no tax on tips and no tax on overtime. Okay. And I think in a way, it was really sold to help people understand how it's going to help the individual. Okay. So as an individual person, you can earn up to $25,000 in tips and not pay taxes on those tips. Um, and then you could also, if you get overtime, overtime is usually calculated at what rate? Time and a half, right? So time and a half is if you make $10 an hour, then your overtime pay would be $15 an hour. Okay. And so something that I thought was really interesting from this webinar that came out that I didn't understand was the tax ruling on no tips or no tax on overtime is just that extra $5, just that half portion, not the entire $15 that you're not going to be taxed on. It's just that extra beyond your normal hourly rate. But still, that adds up over time. But now take that, what we just talked about, and how does that apply to employers? How does that impact the employer's taxes?
Does that make their taxes go up since their employees are not paying tax?
Their taxes are going to go down.
Really?
Right. So if in before, if that employee was paying those taxes on those tips as counted as an overall income, then the employer was also paying taxes on those tips. Because remember that the tax liability is shared between the employer and the employee. So they each pay half. So whatever your FICA taxes are on your paycheck, your employer is paying the exact same amount in taxes. So if your taxes as an employee goes down, then the tax liability for the employer also goes down. And then they can take that money, ideally, take that money and reinvest it back into the business. So maybe they'll have actually money to now invest in updating the equipment in the kitchen. Or maybe buying some new dining room that's going to elevate the atmosphere in the dining room, and people will, the guest, it'll make the dining experience more enjoyable. And so that's, I think, something that was not something that I had considered prior to attending this webinar. Is that how that also is not only beneficial to the employees, but it's also beneficial to the organization as well. And the interesting thing about this is that this is predated. So the legislation passed in July, but it's actually predated to January 1 of 2025. So there were times when I was a server at Cheesecake Factory, there were times where I got a zero paycheck. My paycheck said void across it because my paycheck didn't, there was no money on my paycheck. Okay, and you look really confused. Why do you, so are you wondering how that happens? Okay, so let me give you an example.
In there.
Well,
Been there.
in a way, it's not cool because I don't get a paycheck, but in the other way, I have cash in my pocket for my tips. And so I already got my money in advance, essentially. Okay. So the way that it works, let's say I work a 20-hour work week. Okay. And so if I multiply that by $2.13 per hour, because that's what I made as a server, that is going to be what? $40.26. Is that right? Did I do my math right?
I got 42.60.
42.60. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Got my decimal in the wrong place. Okay. So my paycheck after working 20 hours, my paycheck should be $42.60. Okay. And you're thinking, wow, that's not a lot. Okay. But in those 20 hours, let's say I worked 3 shifts. Okay. So if I worked 3 shifts in those 20 hours and I made an average $60 per shift, okay. Is that right? Yeah, that's about right. So times 3 shifts, that's an extra $180. Okay. I have to pay taxes on those $180. And if my taxes were more than $42.60, then basically the government's going to take my $42.60 to pay my taxes, and I'm not going to have any money left over in my paycheck. But I've got $180 in cash in my pocket. Okay. Thank you. And so that's where oftentimes as managers, we had to the manager had to explain to the servers, like, why do I have a paycheck that has 0 on it? It says void. I can't do anything with this paycheck. And then they had to stop and help us understand that I already got my money in advance. I already have my tips from my cash from my tips. And so that was a big hard lesson for me to learn as a server. Because it's like, man, I worked a whole week or a whole 2 weeks and I get no paycheck. That was one of my biggest challenges as a server because I always had cash in my pocket. I always it is, and cash goes quick. If you don't track it, it's really easy just to spend cash and you don't really know where it's going. So, all right. When we're talking about labor, we do when we talk about labor, we do want to talk about our productivity. Okay. And our productivity, there's a couple different ways that we can gauge that productivity, and one of them is the number of guests we serve per labor dollar. What does that word per represent? What mathematical function?
Right.
Divide. Okay. So that word per is divide. So we could do guests served per labor dollar, right? That's the word per. That's our division sign. Okay. And so this means we served 2,500 people, and it cost me $18,000 in labor to serve those 2,500 people. So if we do that calculation, 2,500 divided by 18,000, we get 0.139. Okay. That means we served 0.13 of a person. Kind of weird to think about it that way. Okay. But we really wanted to serve 0.15. Okay. So is 0.13 lower or higher than 0.15?
Oh,
Lower.
Smaller or larger? It's smaller, which means we did not meet our goal. Okay. So we did not meet our goal of 0.15. That means we spent a little bit more money than we should have. Okay. If I wanted to double check this, oops. If I wanted to hold on. Let's go back. There we go. If I wanted to double check this, okay. If my goal is 0.15, that's my goal of 0.15. If I divide the 2,500 people by 0.15, I get 16,666.67 cents. So that is my budgeted amount. And so as you can see, my budget was about 16,600 and I actually spent 18,000. So I spent more money on labor than I should have. Okay, so that's how we can kind of double check that particular calculation. All right, so let's now look at another example. Total covers served is 200. My labor dollars is 950. So if I divide those two numbers, 200 divided by 950, I get 0.21. Okay. So I served 0.21 covers per labor dollar. So every $1 that I spent, I covered 0.21 of a person. My goal is 0.25. Did we reach our goal? No, we did not. Okay. We did not meet our goal of 0.25. So let's figure out what our goal should have been. Okay. We spent $950. Let's figure out how much more money we spent on labor. If my goal is 200 guests and 0.25 per labor dollar, I should have spent $800. So how much more money did I spend on labor than I should have?
150.
150.
$150. Good. Okay. Now, is spending an extra $150 in labor, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
That depends on what you're.
It depends. This we are looking at one piece of the puzzle. We're just looking at the expense of labor. Okay.
Bigger event.
Now, if I increased my sales as well, if my sales are bigger than my goal, if I exceeded my goal in sales, well, then chances are I need more people because I sold more. I was busier than I thought I was going to be, so I need more people to sell. I need more cooks to cook. I need more servers to be on the floor. Okay. Now, if my sales are down and my labor is up, that's a bad thing because that means I didn't bring in enough money to justify having a higher expenses in labor. So as a manager, oftentimes you have to analyze a report and you have to be able to justify, okay, yes, I know my expenses are higher, but my expenses were up by 5%, but my sales were up by 10%. So that means it justifies having more expenses. Okay, let's do another one. Total covers is 7,500. Our total labor dollars were $65,000 in labor. So if we divide those two numbers, you get 0.115. So did we achieve our goal?
Yes.
Yes, we did. Because 0.115 is higher than 0.1. We achieved our goal. Okay. Let's see what we should have spent, what our budget was if Sorry, oops, that's the wrong number. 7,500 is my goal, divided by 0.1. That means my budget was $75,000. Okay, that means my budget was $75,000. I only spent 65,000, so I was able to control my labor costs. I was able to save that $10,000. Okay, how do we do that? How do we reduce our labor costs while maintaining our level of productivity?
If you're gonna get less people, make sure, have more experience, like have a, how to say that, have like a, you must have so much experience before.
Yeah, so if our people are either cross-trained or are well-trained, then we can probably do more with less employees, right? Versus if we have people who are not as trained, then we probably have to have more employees on hand. Okay. So let me give you an example. Let me show you real quick. So anybody in here been a server before? Okay. Anybody? Okay, cool. Anybody online been a server? Awesome. So as a server, we often have a floor plan of our dining room. There we go. Okay. And so I did this randomly, so I'm not sure if this is going to work out, but we'll see. Okay. So we might have 4 table sections. With one section that has 3 tables. Okay. So we might have section 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay. So we have a floor plan. This is when we have 6 servers. Well, what happens if we only have 4 servers or 5 servers? Okay. So when I was at TGI Fridays, there was a binder up at the front at the hostess station. And so if we went for every scenario of having anywhere from 2 servers on up to 8 servers. And so if we had 8 servers, then everybody knew what section they were in and what tables were there specifically. Okay. But let's say we drop this down into 4 sections. So if we drop this down into 4 sections, we're going to get rid of section 6 and section 5. Okay. We may close those sections and keep everybody the same, or we might just absorb those. And so now section 4 becomes maybe these 6 tables. Section 3 maybe becomes those 7 tables. And then we have 5 and 5. And so that way we know who's going to which section and which which tables are theirs. So there's no confusion. Okay. Manager walks out. Hey, we're going to four servers. So stations 1, 2, 3, and 4, you're still on. Sections 5 and 6, make sure you do your side work before you check out and do your reports. Okay. And so that's how we monitor and control that productivity with our labor dollars. All right. Using master schedules is another way that we can control how many hours we're spending on labor. Okay. So in this case, if we're looking, our productivity in this case for servers is probably going to be about 20 guests per hour. And how do I know that? How many servers do we have? We have 4 servers, and at 12 o'clock, we're at 80 guests. So that means my server should be able to handle 20 guests per hour. Okay. Now at 1 o'clock, we have 90 guests. So we have to decide, do I bring in an additional server to cover those extra 10 people, or can I rely on my staff? Are they trained well enough that they can maybe take on two or three extra people per hour? And that will help cover that. So sometimes if you can handle that, if your staff is able to handle that, that's great. And that helps you save on your labor dollars. Okay. And so in this case, we don't need to have all 4 servers come in at 10 o'clock because one person can handle 15 people. Okay. Or should be able to. Typically, that's going to be your opener. They may be one of your stronger servers. Okay. And so in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. See, this is 12, 13, 14, 15. Oh, there we go. It's right there. So we have 15 hours of labor that we can spend on servers. Okay. And that's how we develop that master schedule. If I brought every single server in at the beginning, and I kept them all the way till the end. Okay. I'm going to highlight that in red. So these 3 hours and these 2 hours. That represents 5 hours of work. Okay. Let's say we pay our servers $10 an hour. Okay. Plus tips. So 5 hours times $10, that's $50. Okay. And we multiply that $50 by 360 days a year, that's $18,000 extra in labor we would actually be paying if we brought all servers in at the same time. Are all 4 servers going to be busy at 10 o'clock? No, because we only have 15 people in there. And so, and this is an estimate, right? We may get a little busy, busier than normal, or maybe slower than normal. So we might actually send people home early. Or if we know that there's going to be like a big convention in town, we might schedule a little bit differently. Okay. But having this master schedule allows us to understand what our labor dollars available are. Okay. The next thing we want to talk about is turnover. Turnover is expensive. Okay. We have to hire new people. People leave. We have to hire new people. That turnover is expensive. And so if I take the total number of employees that was hired during a period of time, divided by the number of employees that are needed to run our operation, when we consider ourselves to be fully staffed, what number does that represent fully staffed? Okay. And so in this case, we had 115 employees hired. And in our operation, it takes us 75 employees to be fully staffed. So 115 divided by 75 is 1.533. So that means move that decimal place over at 153.3% turnover rate. Okay. At 153% turnover rate. I can't say what a common industry average is, but I do know that our industry traditionally has a higher turnover rate. Okay. So 153.3% times our 75 employees. Okay. Times the $250 per employee, that cost me that turnover cost me $28,743.75. That's how much it cost me to replace and to hire those 114 people, 115 people. $28,000. Okay. So when we want to calculate the cost of that employee training, we take that percentage of turnover, we multiply by the number of employees that's needed for the operation, and then how much it costs us to actually train that person. So what happens? What if we decrease this number? Let's take a look at this. If we reduce from 153 to 93%, what is that difference in reduction? What's 153.3 minus 93.3?
60.
60%. Okay, so we're looking at a 60% decrease. So if I can decrease my turnover rate by 60%, that's a pretty ambitious goal. So 0.6 times those 75 employees. Remember that, where does that 75 number come from? That's the number if we are fully staffed. If I am fully staffed and fully operational, that's that number that it requires me to be fully staffed is 75. Okay. So 60% times that 75%, that 75 employees times $250 is $11,250. That's the money I would save compared to that $28,000, right? I would still have to hire 45 people, but I would save $11,250. That's almost $1,000 a month I could save if I were to decrease my turnover. Because remember, with turnover, we have to train people. So it takes time for them to train. It also, depending on the position, I know for servers, for sure, oftentimes you have someone who is shadowing you, or you're shadowing somebody else to learn how to be a server. So now you're paying 2 people to do 1 job. So your productivity, your labor dollars are going to go really high, but you're still serving the same number of people. So your productivity is going to drop while you're training. And so all those things come into play. If people didn't leave, then I wouldn't have to train people. I wouldn't have to train their replacements. Okay. And so we could save, as we're looking at how much we could save potentially, we take that original turnover rate, we subtract what our goal turnover rate is, and that's our difference. So now we take that difference, multiply it by the number of employees that are needed, and multiply it by the hiring. Now, $250 is probably pretty inexpensive for replacing an employee. And so oftentimes it's best if we could just keep our employees. And so how could I spend $11,000 to try to help keep my employees rather than letting them leave?
And then bonuses for certain things, reward, like
Okay, yeah, so maybe giving them different perks or different bonuses. Maybe if we have, like if we reward really good behavior, and productivity, okay? So like, let's say you're a cook and, today we had 0 errors. So nothing came back to the kitchen because it was cooked incorrectly. Okay, so if that's the case, then everybody who contributed to that success, their name goes into a hat. And then I'm gonna pick a name at the end of the week, or at the end of the shift, and whoever's name I pick is gonna get $50 to HEB. All right, servers, whoever sells the most appetizers, okay, or maybe every appetizer you sell, you get your name in the hat. So if you sold 10 and somebody else sold 5, well, you have a better chance of winning because you sold more. In the end, everybody benefits because if you sell appetizers, then that means the ticket price typically will go up, right? And then they get tipped based on a percentage usually. And then also the sales and the revenue for the organization will also go up as well. Okay, so Lorena mentioned working at the airport, the company pays that $100 to get them credentialed and have their badge so they can work at the airport. Yeah, so that's just that process, not anything to do with anything, all the other training and all the other things that go into that. So that is a huge expense. And the fact that the company pays that for you is even better. Um, and so think about how we could potentially spend that $11,000. Okay, you know what? We're going to close today, and our entire restaurant, we're all going to go to um, Andretti's, and everybody's going to get one free go-kart ride. And you're going to have 2 hours of gameplay, and you can bring your families, and we're going to provide food for you. Okay. And so by developing that type of appreciation, oftentimes people quit people before they quit a job. And so that turnover, if we see we have a high turnover, maybe we need to stop and look, remember, put on our detective hat and figure out why do we have a high turnover rate? Okay. Is it because there's one person that's worked with us forever and their attitude sucks and nobody wants to work with that person? Okay, so do I keep that one person and have to keep retraining and retraining and retraining and spend money on retraining people? Or do I figure out as a business owner, you know what? This isn't working out. I'm going to let you go. And then team morale gets boosted. And then now we can be more productive. Okay. Um, I don't know. I just hope that I would never be that person that nobody would be the reason why somebody would leave a job. Okay. Um, and so sometimes it does take some time. Okay. Just because everyone thinks that somebody's attitude sucks, that's not a reason to fire somebody. Okay. We have to have a legitimate reason. Well, I guess we don't have to, but we should have some kind of, in order to avoid any kind of um, potential legal situations where somebody feels like they're let go for an unjust reason, that could add up, yeah, that could add up into something else, right? But we do want to make sure that we are evaluating the reason why we have a high turnover rate. Maybe we have a high turnover rate because we only spend a week on training and we turn people loose before they feel actually ready to be fully submersed in the job. And so now they're making errors and then they feel frustrated. And so then they leave and they go find a job somewhere else. Okay. And so there's all these different reasons potentially. And so as a boss, as a leader, you have to sit there and figure out, okay, why is my turnover rate this rate? And then what can I do to reduce that? And if I did reduce that, what would be my potential savings? Okay. And how could I reinvest those savings back into my people so that they will feel better and then they will want to stay? If we do have to hire people, how many of y'all have incentive programs where you work? Like if you refer somebody to work and they start working there and they last after the 90 days, either you and or the person who got hired both get some kind of incentive. Anybody have that? What's your situation?
Was that a Cheesecake Factory?
Okay.
$1,000 to get a regular employee there, or $10,000 if you can get them a manager.
All right. Who needs to get $10,000? Because I will go manage. No, I'm just kidding. We'll split it 50-50. No, but that's really good. $1,000 if you get somebody hired as an employee, and typically the caveat is they have to last past their probationary period, which is usually 90 days, and then you get that incentive. Why do companies offer incentive like that to their employees?
Word out.
What's that?
Get the word out.
Get the word out, okay. Um, so
I would say retention.
it is about retention. If you're going to refer somebody to come work for that company, are you going to refer anybody? Or are you going to refer somebody that you know you can rely on? Right? So typically, when you have those referral programs, the candidates that are being referred by your internal employees are usually a better quality person because they are aware of the culture. They're aware of somebody who already works there. They already have some that kind of connection. But then also that person who's working there, I'm not going to refer somebody who's not going to last because if I do that, then that reflects poorly on me as an employee. I'm only going to refer somebody that I know is going to last because A, I want that money, but two, or B, I want to make sure that that person is a quality person because it reflects poorly on me as an individual if they don't stay. And so I don't want my reputation as a hard worker, as a great employee to be tarnished by just giving anybody a referral. I want to make sure that person is qualified and that person has the ability to be a good employee. So those referral programs often work. Okay. Lorena is skeptical if they actually go through with paying that. That's between you and the employer. Um, but yeah, I think that's a great way to help build your team. I'll give you a perfect example. My sister worked at Chester's Hamburgers. Now they didn't do any kind of referral program, but she worked at Chester's Hamburgers. And in my family, the day after you turned 16, you had to have a job. Okay. You could have your birthday off, but after your birthday, it's kind of time to get to work. So at the age of 16 and one day, I got a job at Chester's Hamburgers because that's where my sister worked. So I went in, filled out my application, and then I had a lot of fun. And I sitting in class in high school, and I was like, "Hey, do you guys want to come work with me? Like, why not hang out? Let's hang out at work and get paid to hang out with each other." Okay. Now we had to hang out and work. Like we couldn't just hang out and not do our job. Okay. But we had to work, but it made work more enjoyable when you're working with your friends, especially at that age of 16 to 18. And so I think I got four of my friends hired. And so we had a lot of fun working through high school because we hung out during the day at school and then we'd work at night together. And then even for a year after high school, we still continued working at that job. And it was a lot of fun because we had that um, camaraderie already. And so, and when people are typically enjoying, their productivity is usually higher and whatnot. So yeah, it's labor controlling our labor costs is really important. And we can do that by one of the ways we can do that is by ensuring that our team members are having an enjoyable time at work. If people dread, especially in hospitality, if people dread coming to work, that's going to translate into their productivity or that's going to translate into their guest service interactions. And so, if we can have that environment where people are genuinely excited to come to work and provide excellent guest service, then the guest service experience is going to increase, your experience is going to increase, and then overall the business will just win. And it's a win-win for everybody because you spend so much time at work, you might as well enjoy what you're doing. I've always told my friends the moment that I start dreading what I'm doing is the time that I start looking for a new job because I always want to make sure. Now, I understand that every day can't be sunshines and rainbows. Okay. There are going to be challenging days. So it's not like, oh my gosh, I have a challenging day. I'm going to stop and quit. I'm going to find something else. Right. That's not a good attitude. But just think about the overall enjoyment of your job. And especially in hospitality, our industry is extremely challenging and extremely taxing. Um, I think I've talked about it in my other class. But you know, anybody remember the end of Toy Story, the first movie, where the credits roll? And remember, in the first Toy Story movie, Barbie gives a tour of the toy store in her convertible as she's driving through the whole toy store. At the very end of the credits, if you never made it that far, the very end of the credits, you have Barbie at the end. And she's like, bye-bye, bye-bye. And then like as soon as like a few minutes goes by, she's like, are they gone? They're gone? Oh my gosh, my cheeks hurt from smiling so much. And that's what it's like in our industry. We are on all the time and it's exhausting. So sometimes even if we're people persons or people, sometimes when I go home, I don't want to talk to anybody. I've already had enough social interactions for the day. And so in our industry, because we are so guest focused, and even if you're not guest interacting, you still have an impact on the guest experience. Um, because we are so guest focused, it takes that passion, it takes that pride in our work. And so, how do we as leaders and managers develop that in our employees and help instill that so that they can then provide that excellent guest service to our guests? Um, how many of you culinary and pastry people, um, when somebody is taking a bite of the food that you've prepared and you're watching them? Okay, but not like in a creepy way, but you're just like staring at them. Okay. And they take that first bite and they close their eyes and they're like, what feeling does that give you?
It was really great.
It feels really great, right? It's energizing. I want to keep doing more of that. And so that's the passion that we need in our industry. And I think the moment that our employees and our associates start dreading and just going through the motion and start dreading coming to work is when that guest experience declines. And so what can we do? How can we spend that extra $11,000 to help increase our employee appreciation so that they can continue to provide that excellent guest service? Rather than, I would rather, if I've got great employees, I would rather spend that $11,000 on them than trying to hire new people to replace those great employees. Questions, comments, concerns about labor? What's one thing that you learned today about labor that you didn't know before? Anybody? Or a thing that was very surprising that we talked about?
Like you're not getting like the voided paychecks.
Voided paychecks. Yeah. Voided having it's very shocking the first time it happens. Like you open up that envelope and it says void, and you're like, what? And then I was like, oh yeah, I've got all this money in my pocket. That's where my paycheck is. Excellent. The cost to train. And not only the cost to train, but also the cost to post. So now you almost have to use like Indeed and Monster and all those different online resume posting sites, and it costs money to do that. So it costs money to host your job position on those different sites. And so that's an additional cost it takes to bring in a new person. Anybody else?
It's way more than just hourly wages.
Yeah, absolutely. It's way more than just hourly. Good. Anybody else?
It's not as complicated as one of my ex employers made it seem.
Okay. All right.
I mean, it's complicated.
Well, it is complicated, and I started the class off with this is a very overly simplified explanation of labor. But yes, it is extremely complicated, and it is important to have somebody in that role that understands all the intricacies of it. Yeah, I mean, if you, Lorena, to your comment, you get compliments all the time. Um, and then other people also maybe have a similar fully staffed, but if they don't put that pride into preparing that food, that comes through in the product. So yeah, great example.
I didn't know that the employers paid the same amount.
The employers have that tax liability as well as the employee, absolutely, in addition to like unemployment insurance. So, all right, so next class, we will talk about chapter 10. It's going to go through relatively quickly just because it's a lot of summary of what we've already talked about in other chapters. And so we'll talk about chapter 10, and then I need somebody to remind me on what's today, Wednesday? So on Monday, I need somebody to remind me to go over how to do the project, how to wrap up the project after we talk about chapter 10. Okay. If I say at the end of chapter 10, okay, class is done, I need somebody to raise their hand and be like, nope, tell us about the project, how to wrap up the project, because I will probably forget between now and then. Okay. And then starting Wednesday next week, we will go into that project workday format for the remainder of the semester until Thanksgiving. Okay. And so what that means is you have to log in or come into class. If you have already done the assignments, the recipe assignments that are due that following Monday, then you're good to go. As soon as I take attendance, you can clock it, you can check out, okay? Or you can stay on and ask me questions about future recipes. But if you have not completed the recipes that are due that following Monday, you need to remain online or in class working on those recipes. And then that way I'm available to answer any questions you might have. Okay. All right. Thank y'all so much. Have a great day. We'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend.